job. However, whether it's true or not, if you believe it, it's true. Things are true if you believe in them. And you expect consequences from that truth, even if it's not an authentic truth. Branding works in the same way, right? We develop an understanding of a place because we get signals about that place, from that place, that are consistent in their message, whatever that message may be. Now, what happens at a national level can also happen at a sub-national level. There's no reason why people can't have an image of Labrador out there. Cape Breton. Cape Breton has a very strong image out there, especially in Western Europe, by the way. Right? So the ability to engage, first of all, making sure that people know that you exist. That's the first purpose of branding, making sure people know that you exist. And therefore, there are more choices involved, and you can be part of that choice that people have. Secondly, what is it about you that may convince or attract people to put you on their map for some reason, whether it's for investment, whether it's for recreation, whether it's for education. Nova Scotia, again, very well known because of its concentration of higher education institutions. I hope that answers your question.
I'm wondering about the role of universities. I liked the first slide you had that, maybe not the very first, but it showed different kind of forms of island. Yes, exactly. And was part of, you had just come from a discussion about the kind of central peripheral relationships. And one of the driving kind of images behind this central peripheral thing is kind of a view from the Enlightenment about cosmopolitanism. And so I'm wondering about the possibilities for the role of universities building on a different understanding of what kind of drives intellectual openness and exchange. And quite a few years ago, there was a book, one of my favorite titles. It was called Cape Breton is the Thought Control Center of Canada.
The what, sorry?
The Thought Control Center of Canada. It was an amusing title. But many years, I don't even remember the content of the book anymore, but it implies some kind of different base for intellectual exchange and openness than cosmopolitanism. And I'm wondering if you have anything you could say about the role of universities in the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada.
Well, I'm not going to comment about Cape Breton as the thought center of the region or of the country, but certainly you refer to the slide, and the Anthropo model depends significantly on the presence of tertiary education institutions, which this is a chicken and egg situation. So they were there from the outset in many cases, and they managed to plug in and support and sustain the diverse economic activity that transformed these places into cosmopolitan regions. And that, of course, is said while keeping in mind that a university itself is usually a more cosmopolitan kind of environment, because a university, especially if it recruits internationally, right, you already have a critical mass of a community, an intellectual community, that's probably coming from a fairly wide geographical spread. So that in itself can transform at least the campus into a mini hotspot for innovation. The problem that I find with that model, when you locate it in a place like Atlantic Canada, is that the surrounding community, the context in which these universities are located, is not necessarily conducive to share or partake or engage with the diversity that's available on campus, with the result that we either have a kind of an ivory tower orientation, we do our thing, and who cares about what's happening outside our doors, or else there's only an engagement with people who are seen to be local. And this to me is one of the pains of living in this part of the world. It's not so much an ideological divide that divides us. It's not so much that we are leftists or rightists, but it's whether we're from here or from somewhere else. And I think this is worth thinking about, because there's a certain false glorification of locality, right? That if taken to an extreme is going to shut out the possibility of any form of genuine exchange with anyone else. Now, you've noticed my presentation. It's all about pride of place and sense of place and agency in place, right? But that agency in place has to allow, not just tolerate, allow and encourage input and ideas and a presence of other players. Otherwise, it can become stagnant very quickly. Thank you, Justine. Yes, I think if I understand your question correctly, the way in which we sometimes need to handhold our local potential entrepreneurs to guide them to whatever it takes to set up local businesses, I think that's a very important skill. But local businesses can also exist in an informal sense. So my understanding of entrepreneurship is not of somebody who suddenly wakes up one morning and says, wow, I have a great idea, let's do it. My understanding is much more rooted in a kind of a graduated approach to entrepreneurship. So very usually people who do eventually set up their own business do spend some time thinking carefully about whether it works, whether it's viable, whether they have the capital, the resources, etc., to do it, and so on. So within the informal economy, there is lots of opportunity for flexing that kind of innovation, right? If there is scope, take it forward. But of course, to take it forward properly, you may need the involvement of, again, education institutions, vocational centers, specialized vocational centers in particular. Many of our small communities cannot afford to have, of course, a higher education institution. But they may be able to support a specialized center that not only speaks to the advantages of the place, but can actually attract other people, especially those looking for the quality of life kind of experience, right? This is the great thing of small places. They don't have to specialize. Sorry, they don't have to be generalists, because those are things that can be done in big places by big universities which have big labor and student pools. They can afford to specialize, and they can specialize and should specialize in those areas where there is some synchronicity with whatever gives the place a certain strength, right? And chambers of commerce, NGOs, other opportunities for leadership, even in the third sector, right? I have a student at the moment at UPEI. She's doing a study of the role of women's institutes in rural communities, because these have been in the past spaces where women in particular who have not had traditionally a public life, right? They have had the opportunity to find themselves located in activities which give them not just visibility, but even a political role, political with a small p, in their own communities. So yes, by all means, I think that training and education driven by local agencies, possibly supported by financing from outside, but not necessarily, has a role to play in this.
I'd also wonder if you could comment on education before that vocational stage in rural areas, and I'm thinking along the lines of socialization and the fact that education, say secondary, primary, are things that everyone has access to anyway. Have you thought about the role of that level of education in this, I guess, schema, if you will?